Welcome to session 1, What is Mindfulness? So in this session, I'm going to go over the nuts and bolts of what is mindfulness, what are misconceptions about what it is, and then what does it actually look like to practice and to grow our ability to be mindful. And then I'll also pass us over to our first practice meditation. So as I mentioned, what is mindfulness? I'm going to be using the definition of Jon Kabat-Zinn, who's someone that's been very big in bringing mindfulness into psychology and medicine and research. And his definition is that mindfulness is the awareness that arises when you pay attention in a particular way. And that way is on purpose, moment by moment, and really importantly, non-judgmentally. So actually making a concerted effort to be aware and present in the moment, in each moment, and to make the best effort to dispel judgment so that where you can actually see what's happening in that moment and not be distracted or paralyzed or affected by how we judge what's happening in that moment. In paying attention in this way, we're trying to cultivate a curious attention to our lived experience in the moment. Most of the time, most of us are living on autopilot. We're either rehashing the past or we're rehearsing what's to come in the future, and we're hardly ever really in the now. It seems like we don't really feel like it's worth paying attention to or that we don't need to. And because our mind is just so busy all the time, we miss a lot of detail of our life and our experience in the moment. And we often end up discounting the value and the meaning of what's happening in the moment. We're missing a lot of information that would be really helpful for us to make decisions and to maybe operate in different ways. So what we want to do is shift out of autopilot. And this doesn't mean suppressing or ignoring your thoughts and feelings or trying to regulate anything at all. What we're trying to do is to let our experience unfold from moment to moment and learn to accept them as they are so that we can actually work with what's going on with us. The ability to be mindful and present in the moment is an ability that can be grown with practice. Just like any other skill or like growing a muscle. With consistent practice, our ability to be aware in the present can become more of a default. And the way that we grow this is by cultivating awareness over time of even when our mind has wandered, when we're rehashing the past, or when we're rehearsing the future. Being able to be aware that that's happening, and then to bring ourselves back to something salient and connected to us in the present moment. And every time that we notice our mind wander and we bring it back to the present, that is a moment of mindfulness. It's not stopping the thoughts from happening. It's not suppressing anything. It is simply growing our ability to be aware of what our mind is doing and to bring it back to what's most important in the moment. And lastly, without judgment, without letting our judgments about what we're thinking or about whether our mind has wandered at all, without letting them send us off into really unhelpful directions or paralyzing us or causing us to react in our very old, automatic, and very unhelpful ways. In this course, we're going to be shifting from the doing mode to the being mode. Kind of fostering calmness, slowing things down, and bringing in things like acceptance and self-acceptance, and all of this by learning to observe your mind from moment to moment. And while in the moment, learning how to observe your thoughts and what your mind's doing, and how to let go of them without getting caught up in them or driven by them. And in this way, I hope for you to be able to then make room for new ways of seeing old problems and for perceiving the interconnectedness of all things and of ourselves with our body. From my point of view, as long as you're breathing, there is more right with you than wrong with you, no matter what's wrong with you. And so here it says reorientation. And these next few sessions, I really invite you to start to reorient yourself with your body and your own mind and your life by pouring energy in the form of attention into what is right with you, much of which we really take for granted and aren't aware of. And when you do that, just see what starts to happen. And so the mindfulness practice that we'll begin establishing together is really an invitation for you to become more familiar with your own body, mind, and life by paying attention in new and more systematic and more loving ways. And so in this course, we're hopefully launching a new way in which to be a relationship to yourself, your body, and your life. And this will really take practice. And so with each session comes a new, different way to meditate or practice mindfulness, and a way to help you to start making your own mindfulness practice. So I've been talking a lot about what mindfulness is, but I think it's also important to touch on what it's not. Mindfulness is not about clearing your mind of thoughts. It's not about forcing your mind to not wander. That's not really possible. Our mind makes thoughts the way our mouth makes saliva. That's just what it does. This is more about being aware when our mind is wandered, being able to cultivate this awareness, and then when you're aware, as best as you can, gently bringing back your attention, redirecting it to what's most salient for you in that moment. And then mindfulness is not a relaxation exercise. Meditation can be deeply relaxing, and you may have moments of calm and ease, but that is not the goal. Sometimes we practice and we're just not relaxed, and we can't force ourselves to be. The goal is really just to be present with what's already here in the moment, and if possible, hold it with kindness. But really, the goal is to have no goal. Let go of the goals. And then mindfulness, it's not a quick fix. This is not a tool that I'm handing to turn around and fix everything in your life. Even though we can sometimes feel very at peace right away in mindful meditation, we'll have a lot of meditations during which we feel really restless or anxious. And this is a practice that unfolds over time. There might be points in these sessions where things don't quite click. And I encourage you to remain patient and allow, with practice over time, things will start to come together for you. And lastly, mindfulness is not a technique. It's really meant to become more of a way of life, or a particular lens that you see the world through, that you interface with things through. And you'll continually hear that it's not really about doing or getting anywhere. It's much more about being and allowing yourself to already be where you are, so that you can then choose to be in wiser relationship to what's already happening. To not fight what's happening or ignore what's happening, but really acknowledge and accept it, so that you can shift it if you want to, or you can interact with it differently and more adaptively. Really, in the end, things like relaxation tend to emerge all by themselves when we wholeheartedly engage with our meditation practice and with mindfulness. There are different ways to practice. I'm going to go over what it can look like formally and informally to practice. So formal practice, an example of that will be that with each session, we'll sit together and I'll guide you through a different meditation or mindfulness exercise. So it's when you kind of sit and formally practice, putting aside a time to do that. And then informal practice is the practice of being mindful while participating in everyday activities, like doing the laundry, washing your hands, eating, really just kind of being able to observe in the moment, what are you feeling, what are you sensing, what do you hear, and so on, using that activity in that moment to tie you to the present. And both of these practices support and strengthen each other. And practicing is really important. Time to practice doesn't magically appear in anyone's life. You have to make time. You have to schedule it. You have to find time in your schedule. And even though we're going from doing mode to being mode, sometimes it takes a little bit of doing to get that going. And you don't have to like practicing. You just have to do it. And if you don't practice and you come back to these sessions, you ultimately might find yourself not quite connecting with the content because words are really limiting. There's only so much we can describe and experience. It really takes starting to experience it for yourself to start editing these things to fit them to you personally and for you to really understand what is meant by the things that are being taught here. And in so doing, I really encourage you, especially because this is just me talking and you trying to put this together for yourself at home, I really encourage you to know that you're the expert on yourself. And a lot of times when people start meditating or being more mindful, they become aware of increased symptoms or feelings because often these are things that they haven't really been paying attention to or have been ignoring for a while. So trust in the process of noticing and shifting that you need to do when things become maybe too intense for you. Just knowing when to lean in and when to lean out. And I encourage you to go with what your gut is telling you about which one is right for you in that moment. Neuroplasticity. Why am I talking about neuroplasticity? It's a big part of why I even made this course. Because for such a long time, it was really thought that our brains were fixed and finite and that they only degraded over time. And really, in the last however many years, it's been shown otherwise. It's been shown that our brain really has the capacity to adapt and change throughout our lifespan, both in structure and function. And that this happens usually through response to novel experiences in our life, whether it's meditation, therapy, or different things we experience or traumas. They all change our brains. And even if one thing changes it, it can always be changed in another direction. But sometimes this takes very focused and concerted effort. And mindfulness practice is one way to change your brain. There are very automatic ways that we are or how we react to things. And with mindfulness, we can increase our awareness and ability to, in the moment, catch ourselves doing these things that are usually mindless. And with that focused attention, change the way that we decide to react to a way that is much more helpful and adaptive for us. And this is why practice is so important, because we have these very well-worn grooves in our mind of ways that our neurons fire. And so if we're trying to change those, it might take a lot of times of doing the alternative action or thought in order to, over time, make that the more well-worn groove and more automatic way of operating. Our bodies are back from hunter-gatherer days, and we're now living in an up-to-date, very fast-paced world. And this is a way that I like to think of it as manually updating our software to be able to live in the world we're in now. We don't have to react the way we did when a saber-toothed tiger was around the corner, when our emails are coming in. So this might take us using our focused attention through mindfulness to catch ourselves operating in these ways and to over time shift them. So you've made it all the way to the time to practice. And we're going to start with the body scan. And a reason I do this is because mindfulness is not just an intellectual exercise. It's really about, at least in this course, deepening the mind-body connection. And our aim is to get reacquainted with the body and the physical sensations that we experience. What goes on in the brain has an influence on the body and vice versa. The mind is the body. And many people are just so disconnected from their bodies that it feels like they almost can't detect sensations in the body. And this can be particularly the case when someone's dealing with something like a chronic illness or condition. The body scan can be really important for opening up more of a dialogue and information pathways for healing between the mind and the body. And so we're going to be scanning through the body to different parts of the body. And I'm just going to be encouraging you to be open to whatever sensation is there, to observing it, to kind of accepting that it exists, and to dispelling any judgment that we have. You might find that you want to linger longer in some places and less long in others, but as I move through, I encourage you to kind of follow the pace as well, to not hold on or let go prematurely. I'm not asking you to ask for anything from your body. It's more about receiving the sensations, and this might be completely new to you because normally we only pay attention to our body really when we want it to perform or to look good or do something for us. So it can be kind of challenging to stick with this meditation in the beginning, but I encourage you just to try, because when you regularly practice the body scan, you start to notice that your body is never quite the same in each scan, that it's constantly changing over time, and that what we think our experience is in every moment might really not be. And so I also encourage you, if something is too intense, some sensation, and you feel the need to either continually go away from the feeling and come back, I encourage you to do so, or if it's just too much, allow yourself to go to a different part of the body. As I mentioned, you are the expert on yourself. So give it a try.